Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're picking up where we left off. Remember that wild family dynamic we've been dissecting when a child becomes the husband?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It really is. So last time we dug into how a narcissistic mother and well, let's just say not so present father can end up with the oldest son, often the golden child, morphing into this surrogate spouse.
Right, trying to fill a void that's not even theirs to fill.
Exactly. And it's heartbreaking, honestly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Families are like ecosystems, right? Everything's connected. So this time we're shifting focus a bit. We're going beyond the golden child and looking at what happens to the other siblings in this mess.
Because believe me, they don't escape unscathed.
Not at all. So to help us untangle this web, we've got a returning expert, a psychoanalyst who specializes in complex PTSD and trauma-informed therapy. Plus, they've seen firsthand the ripple effects of narcissistic abuse.
It's almost like a ripple effect, yeah.
Okay, so picture this. You're growing up in the shadow of this perfect golden child. Everything you do, every grade, every friend, it's all measured against them. That's life for the scapegoat sibling, constantly compared, and usually not in a good way.
It's a recipe for disaster, honest.
Right. I mean, talk about pressure. It's got to do a number on your self-worth.
Yeah.
What are some of the long-term impacts you see in your work, especially when it's the mother, the primary caregiver, who's the narcissistic one?
Well, imagine being the kid who can never measure up. No matter what you do, it's never good enough. And because the narcissistic mother needs someone to blame to be the source of all the family's problems, the scapegoat, well, they become the easy target.
So the golden child can do no wrong, but the scapegoat is set up to fail.
Exactly. It's a way for the narcissistic mother to maintain control, to deflect any responsibility for the dysfunction.
And the scapegoat is left holding the bag, so to speak.
Right. And here's the tragedy over time. The scapegoat starts to internalize this. They start to believe that they are flawed, that they are the problem. And that can manifest in a lot of painful ways. Self-sabotage is a big one. They might achieve great things, but deep down, they don't believe they're worthy, so they find ways to undermine themselves.
It's almost like they're subconsciously fulfilling the prophecy.
It's a very real and very sad phenomenon. And then there are the relationships. Scapegoats often have a really hard time forming healthy, secure attachments because deep down, they're terrified of rejection. Which makes sense, right? They've been conditioned to expect it.
It's like they're always bracing for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. And they might overcompensate, become people pleasers, trying to earn love and acceptance that they never really received growing up.
So while the golden child is dealing with the weight of impossible expectations, the scapegoat is carrying the burden of the family's dysfunction.
It's a heavy load for anyone to bear, especially a child.
Absolutely. And what's wild is there's often another sibling in the mix, navigating this chaos in their own way. But they're doing it quietly, almost invisibly. And it might seem like they're okay, but appearances can be deceiving.
Oh, absolutely. They might be the forgotten ones, but that doesn't mean they're not hurting.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the invisible child. So we've got the golden child burdened with these crazy expectations, the scapegoat taking the fall for everything. And then there's this other kid almost blending into the wallpaper.
Yeah.
They're the invisible child, right?
Exactly. And, on the surface, it might seem like they got lucky, dodged a bullet. But trust me, invisibility comes at a price.
I bet. It's like they're playing a dangerous game of hide and seek, except the stakes are their own sense of self.
That's a powerful way to put it. Think about it. They've learned that the safest way to survive in this chaotic, emotionally charged environment is to be quiet, to not make waves, to become almost invisible.
Because drawing attention to themselves means risking becoming the next target.
It can feel that way, absolutely. And the thing is, over time, this adaptation, it becomes a way of life. They start to believe that their needs, their thoughts, their feelings, they just don't matter that much.
That's got to be so isolating, so lonely, to feel like you're living in a house, but no one really sees you.
And that's the tragedy. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they don't speak up, they don't learn how to assert themselves, they don't develop a strong sense of self. And this, unfortunately, often follows them into adulthood.
So they carry that invisibility with them, even when they're no longer living with a narcissistic parent.
So often, they might struggle in relationships, afraid to express their needs, to set boundaries. Because for so long, closeness, intimacy, it was associated with pain, with conflict.
It's like they're stuck in that survival mode, even when they're not in danger anymore.
Right. And the saddest part is, they might not even realize it's happening. They might just feel this underlying sense of emptiness, of loneliness, like they're always on the outside looking in.
And all because they learned early on that the best way to survive was to disappear.
It's a heartbreaking reality. And, you know, what's even more heartbreaking is that often there's another sibling in the mix, one who takes on a very different role. They become the peacekeeper.
Oh, the fixer, the mediator. I can only imagine how exhausting that role must be. Like being the family therapist while you're still trying to figure out your own childhood.
It's a heavy burden to carry, for sure. These kids, they're like emotional sponges. They're hyper aware of everyone else's feelings, always trying to anticipate and manage the next outburst, the next conflict.
And while everyone else is focused on their own role, the peacekeeper is trying to hold the whole family together.
In a way, yes, they learn to walk on eggshells to keep the peace at all costs, even if it means sacrificing their own needs, their own voice.
Which long-term can't be healthy. It's like their worth becomes tied to how much they can fix, how much harmony they can create for everyone else.
And they can get so good at it, so skilled at reading people and managing emotions that it becomes almost second nature.
Mm.
But here's the thing. That need to please, to fix, to keep everyone happy, it often comes at the expense of their own well-being.
Because they're so busy taking care of everyone else, they forget to take care of themselves.
It's a common pattern, and it can create real challenges in their adult life, especially in relationships.
How so?
Well, imagine someone who's spent their whole life putting others' needs first, who's learned that their value lies in their ability to fix and to please. They might struggle to set boundaries, to assert themselves, to even know what they want.
Because their own needs have always been pushed aside.
Exactly. And that can make them vulnerable to people who take advantage, who are drawn to that caretaker energy.
So they end up in relationships where they're constantly giving, constantly fixing, and never really getting their own needs met.
It's a very real risk, and it can be incredibly draining, both emotionally and physically.
So we've got the golden child, the scapegoat, the invisible child, and now the peacekeeper. It's like everyone in this family is caught in a web of dysfunction, each in their own way.
That's a great way to put it, a web of dysfunction, because it really does impact everyone, and the effects can be long-lasting.
It makes you wonder, with all these roles and dynamics at play, what are some of the common threads that connect these siblings? What are the lasting impacts of growing up in a family like this? It's like we've mapped out this whole family system, all the players, all the roles, but there's one person we haven't really talked about yet, the other parent in the house.
The father, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the narcissistic mother's influence, and believe me, it's huge. But families are like, well, we've said it before, ecosystems. Every part matters. So if the mother's got this dominant, often toxic presence, where does that leave the dad? How does that impact him?
It's a great question, and it's something that often gets overlooked,
Uh,
because we tend to focus on the more obvious sources of dysfunction, but the father's role in this whole dynamic, it's crucial, because even in his absence, he's present, if that makes sense.
okay, I think I see what you mean. So it's not always about what he's doing, but more about what he's not doing.
Exactly. Often in these families, the father is emotionally absent. He's checked out, he might be physically present, but emotionally he's miles away. Or, and this is really common too, he's become what we call enmeshed with the narcissistic partner. He's so caught up in her web, so busy trying to appease her that he loses himself in the process.
So either way, whether he's absent or enmeshed, he's not really there for the kids, not in a way that's healthy and supportive.
Exactly. And that lack of a grounded, emotionally available father figure, it can be incredibly damaging for children. They need that validation, that protection, that sense of security that a father can provide. And when it's missing, well, it leaves a void.
And that void, it doesn't just disappear, does it? It follows them, impacts their own relationships, their sense of self.
Absolutely. It can affect everything, their self-worth, their ability to trust, their capacity for intimacy. Because if they couldn't rely on their own father to be there for them, how can they trust anyone else to do the same?
It's like that saying, hurt people hurt people. But it's also true that healed people heal people.
That's beautifully put. And that's ultimately what we're talking about here, isn't it? Healing, breaking free from those unhealthy patterns and creating new, healthier ways of relating to ourselves and to others.
And that's the hope, right? That by understanding these dynamics, by shining a light on these often hidden patterns, we can start to make different choices, both for ourselves and for future generations.
Absolutely. Awareness is the first step. And then, with compassion and support, we can begin to heal the wounds of the past and create a brighter future.
It's like we've given our listeners a map to navigate their own family labyrinth. But it's not about blaming or labeling, right? It's about understanding. It's about having compassion for ourselves and for those around us. Because often, the people who hurt us the most are hurting themselves.
So true. Hurt people, But with understanding, with empathy, we can break that cycle.
It's about rewriting the script, creating a new narrative. And that's a powerful thing. So to our listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. You are not alone. These family dynamics, they're more common than you think. And healing? It's possible. It takes courage, it takes work, but it's possible. So keep asking questions, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep believing in your own capacity for growth and transformation. That's it for this deep dive into the complexities of family dynamics. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.